8,124 homeless people. That's Boston's latest figure for 2025, more than the entire population of Rockport or Lenox combined. And this isn't some war-torn city. This is Boston, once called the Athens of America, a hub of knowledge medicine and prosperity. Why, amidst crowded metropolises and prestigious academic institutions, do thousands have to sleep under exhaust vents to survive the winter? Do they choose to live this way? Or does it just take one incident, one medical bill, one job loss to send you plummeting into the abyss? When we set foot in a developed country, what truly matters? The scenery, the American dream, or empathy? Let's look at Boston with different eyes.
I'm homeless too because I don't got family around.
Right.
And it's hard for me.
It's hard to be homeless out here.
Yeah, I don't like this life like that.
So,
I wish I can have my mom back. I wish I can quit with the drugs. And I wish...
Mass and Cass, the slum amidst glamorous Boston. Right in the heart of Boston, a city that welcomes over 20 million tourists annually, where a cup of coffee can cost up to $8 and a hotel night can reach $400. There exists a slum, unmarked on maps, unmentioned in any tourist brochure, Mass and Cass. At the foot of America's most expensive hospital buildings, adjacent to the administrative center, and just a few blocks from prestigious universities like Harvard or MIT, hundreds of makeshift tents, torn plastic bags, old blankets, and discarded syringes form a mini-society living on the fringes of the urban system. In 2025, Boston recorded 8,124 homeless people, the highest number in over a decade. Notably, over 3,400 people live completely outdoors without any shelter. Many of them choose to set up camp at the intersection of Massachusetts Avenue and Melnia Cass Boulevard, now commonly referred to by locals as Mass and Cass. Here, all social rules seem to be rewritten. Transactions happen without cash. Food is shared by volunteers, but sometimes fought over due to scarcity. The sick don't always go to the hospital. Sometimes all they need is a bag of warm water and a bandage brought by someone. Mass and Cass is not just a location, it's a reminder. While Boston develops at a breakneck pace with billion-dollar startups, advanced medical centers, luxury apartment complexes, there are still people left behind in the very city they once called home. Homelessness is not a distant problem. It's a consequence of an average housing price of $2,950 a month of wages, not keeping pace with the cost of living of cumulative medical, psychological, and economic crises. And sometimes just one incident, like job loss or an unexpected medical bill, is enough to push someone from an apartment to the sidewalk. To understand Mass and Cass, you can't just look with the eyes of a passerby. You have to listen. You have to step in. You have to see the human being in every story. Every meal is a battle at Mass and Cass. A proper meal is a luxury. Most homeless people here rely on the kindness of volunteer groups. Quick-serve meal boxes, dry bread, or thin porridge are the main food sources, sometimes eaten with bare hands, sometimes on the ground. Unhygienic, lacking nutrition, and lacking a sense of safety. Hunger doesn't just make the stomach rumble, it erodes dignity. More than once, a loaf of bread becomes the reason for arguments, snatching, and even violence. In a world where survival is the only goal, seemingly small things can ignite tension. Here, people try to forget the cold, the hunger, and even the painful memories as quickly as possible with stimulants. Many call it mental pain relief. They don't use it for fun, but to survive. A small dose helps them sleep on the sidewalk when winter winds cut through thin layers of clothing. A cheap pill to forget the endless loneliness. But the price paid is not cheap at all. The consequence of vice is violence. In a crowded, uncontrolled, and lawless space, conflict is inevitable. Arguments over a sleeping spot, over food, over loose change, or just a misplaced glance. Most concerning are women and LGBTQ individuals, those who already face discrimination in society, now becoming easy targets for attack, harassment, or exploitation. No cameras, no alarms. Here, fear doesn't dissipate when the sun rises. It lingers throughout the night and the next day. Many have to sleep sitting up, backs against a wall, clutching their backpacks as a last resort to hold on to their meager possessions and their trust. Behind every sleeping bag is a human being struggling between the instinct to survive and the desire to be treated as a dignified person. Mass and Cass is not a story about addicts, but a story about people who are hurting, both physically and mentally. The secrets behind the blue tent. If you think all homeless people are unemployed, addicted, or fell due to the same mistake, you've never stepped behind a blue tent in Boston. In the temporary tent camps at Mass and Cass, there are still people who wake up early every morning, wash their faces with bottled water, change into uniforms neatly folded in their torn backpacks, and then go to work. Delivery drivers, restaurant staff, building security guards, even hospital sanitation workers, they still work regularly. 40 hours a week, sometimes pulling night shifts. Yet their income is still not enough to rent even a single room, when the average rent in Boston has exceeded $2,950 per month for a one-bedroom apartment. Many people live in their cars. During the day, they drive to work. At night, they return to a supermarket parking lot, pull down the window blinds, and curl up to sleep. Others share old warehouses, storage units, or 10 square meter rooms with 7 or 8 people sharing beds. Warmth, and even a silently agreed upon silence. Most notably are the young people. School children, students, even children living in homeless situations, but still attending school every day. They bathe at gas stations, study under public library lights, and hide their circumstances for fear of being stigmatized by friends. Teachers might notice something is wrong, dark circles under their eyes, incomplete homework, but rarely do the children tell the full story. These are the silent secrets behind the tent where the American dream still flickers. No one thinks the server who brings you morning coffee might be sleeping in a Walmart parking lot. No one knows the child smiling brightly during gym class doesn't have a proper bed to sleep in. Homelessness doesn't always mean failure. Sometimes it's just the result of a system that doesn't make room for low-income individuals, even though they contribute to building this very city every day. That secret, that truth, is what Mass and Cass whispers to those who stop and listen. And listening is the first step to understanding. When the welfare system doesn't see you. We often say that America has a good social welfare system where the vulnerable always have a way out. But that's only true if the system recognizes your existence. For thousands of homeless people in Boston, basic things like identification, a permanent address, or a phone number to contact are insurmountable barriers. No address equals inability to apply for unemployment benefits. No ID equals inability to open a bank account, get medical care, or even enroll in vocational training to escape their current situation. This isn't a lack of responsibility, but the result of an administrative system designed for stable people. Those with homes, internet, email, and fixed schedules to get to an office on time and fill out multi-page forms. For someone who has to change sleeping spots every night, making it to a benefits interview or submitting medical documents on time is a luxury. For immigrants, people with disabilities, or non-English speakers, the welfare system becomes even more obscure and distant. A dry legal English notice can be the reason they miss out on a year-long wait for social housing. Many people are denied assistance not because they don't qualify, but because they can't understand how to access it. Meanwhile, services like free medical examinations, mental health counseling, or vocational training centers remain idle, waiting for people to find them, while those who need them most don't even know they exist, or can't navigate the labyrinth of bureaucracy to access them. Invisibly, the safety net becomes an administrative maze where the vulnerable easily get lost and are left behind. The problem here isn't a lack of resources. The problem is a lack of connection flexibility and the ability to see those standing outside the system's boundaries. A person doesn't disappear just because they lose their home. But if no one recognizes them, do they still exist in the eyes of society? Housing crisis. Unwittingly becoming homeless. If one had to choose the biggest reason thousands of people fall into homelessness in Boston, it would be housing prices. In 2025, to rent a one-bedroom apartment in the city center, you would pay on average nearly $3,000 a month. This figure is double the minimum wage and still higher than the actual income of many blue-collar workers. This means that even if you work full-time, you might not be able to afford a roof over your head. While rental costs skyrocket the waiting list for affordable housing stretches from 5 to 10 years. For someone who has just lost their job or experienced a family crisis, 10 years is not a solution. It's a long sentence. No one can temporarily wait for a decade just to have the right to shelter. And it's in that gap that many people start to decline from staying with others to temporarily sleeping in their car and finally to sleeping on the sidewalk. The reality shows that many people choose to sleep in the city center, even near their workplaces, because they cannot afford both rent and long-distance commuting costs. A small room in the suburbs might be cheaper, but if it adds hours of travel and hundreds of dollars in gas, they still cannot sustain it. Thus, the paradox occurs: they continue to work in Boston, but have to sleep outdoors, right next to buildings lit up all night. The housing crisis doesn't just create homelessness, it erodes the stability of the middle class. People who once had stable jobs and lived in compact apartments are now being pushed to a fragile brink. A medical bill, a round of layoffs, a month of late payments is enough to turn a renter into a homeless person. Boston still builds new homes, but most are luxury apartments catering to high-income individuals or wealthy international students, not for local workers. For every luxurious apartment building that goes up surrounding affordable homes disappear, forcing countless families out of places they've lived for years. The housing crisis is the broken bridge between having shelter and losing everything. And once you cross that line, returning is almost unthinkable if the system doesn't change. Mental health. The invisible gap. When we talk about homelessness, we often think about shelter meals or jobs. But there's a more silent, less noticed aspect that directly determines their ability to reintegrate mental health. In Boston, recent reports indicate that the rates of depression, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and anxiety in the homeless community are many times higher than in the general population. This is not difficult to understand. Imagine having to find a corner of the sidewalk to sleep every night, constantly wary of thieves' noise and bitter cold. Try living without knowing if you'll have a meal tomorrow morning. In that environment, the mind can easily collapse. However, having no fixed address means they cannot access long-term treatment systems. Most psychological therapy programs require patients to schedule appointments, have a contact address, and attend regularly. These are things that seem simple for housed individuals, but are almost impossible for those who are constantly moving and lack transportation. Boston has mobile psychological stations, buses converted into counseling rooms, or volunteer groups setting up mental health screening tents. But they operate only during certain hours a few days a week, and human resources are always scarce. While the demand is for thousands, only dozens of people each day have the opportunity to meet with a specialist. Many cases have to wait months for the next appointment, a period long enough for a mental health crisis to erupt and lead to many other consequences. Many people, because they don't receive early intervention, turn to self-medication, alcohol, sleeping pills, or addictive substances to temporarily soothe their anxieties. But this is just a vicious cycle that worsens the situation and makes it harder for them to access official recovery programs. The problem here is not just a lack of resources, but also a lack of a continuous patient and long-term care system. Mental health cannot be treated with a few short counseling sessions. It requires a sustainable strategy, a cohesive network from large hospitals, community clinics, to support stations right on the streets. In a city famous for its advanced medical care, the paradox is there are people who remain unseen, even though they are just a few subway stops from a hospital. And when the mind is forgotten, all other welfare efforts are merely temporary. Boston, where the story of homelessness speaks walking along Mass and Cass. One easily sees the silver tents, plastic bags, and tired eyes. But if you stop and chat, you'll realize that behind each face is a complex personal story, sometimes so incredible you wouldn't expect it. There's a woman in her 40s who used to be a high school teacher at a public school in Boston. She taught literature, loved her students, and was passionate about her profession. However, a lengthy divorce coupled with the medical burden of aging parents wiped out her savings. When she lost her home, she chose to stay in the city to be close to her former students, but eventually had to sit begging at a bus stop, where sometimes the very students who once called her teacher would pass by, unable to believe their eyes. In another corner, there's an international student who used to study engineering. He came to Boston with dreams of a better life, but lost his scholarship after a family crisis back home. Unable to pay for dormitory fees, he found shelter in a makeshift warehouse, working part-time at a restaurant during the day and curling up in a thin blanket at night. He kept his situation hidden because he didn't want friends to pity him, but the dark circles under his eyes in class told all. And then there are men who served in the military. A combat veteran who returned with deep psychological wounds. Losing his wife in an accident, losing his job because he couldn't maintain a stable shift, he gradually lost his home too. Now he lives in a small tent with a few old comrades. For them, the war never ended. It just moved from faraway battlefields to their hometown city. Such stories are not for pity, but to remind us homelessness can happen to anyone. It's not just a problem for those on the fringes of society. It could be a neighbor, a colleague, a teacher, or even ourselves if one day a crisis comes too quickly and the welfare system isn't there to catch us. They, the survivors, are proof that behind every cold statistic are fragile lives, but lives that still hold hope. Silent kindness illuminates. Amidst Boston's biting winter streets, as the wind sweeps through the rows of makeshift tents at Mass and Cass, there are still hands quietly reaching out. Not the hands of the government or large corporations, but the hands of ordinary people. Doctors, students, clergy, and even formerly homeless individuals who now return to help the community they understand better than anyone. One of the most memorable images is the mobile clinic of the Boston Healthcare for the Homeless program. Inside that old converted vehicle, is a mini clinic, medicines, medical instruments, vaccination chairs. Doctors, nurses, and volunteers wander through every street corner, distributing fever medication, treating wounds, giving flu shots, or simply listening to patients talk about the pain they carry. They call this work street medicine, and for many homeless people, this is the only healthcare they can access. In addition, the city also has 24/7 shelters places that are not only open at night, but throughout the day ready to welcome anyone who needs a bed, a hot meal, or a cup of tea. What's special is that here the volunteer team includes not only doctors and lawyers, but also people who were once homeless themselves. They understand the fear of sleeping outdoors. They understand what it feels like to be rejected. This very empathy makes the shelter a refuge for both body and spirit. Beyond official organizations, there are hundreds of small, quiet acts every day. A group of university students after classes cook a large pot of soup together and distribute it for free on the streets. A cleric hands out old warm clothes collected from parishioners. A family brings down blankets and places them next to a stranger's tent. These are not long-term solutions, but they are proof that compassion still exists. And sometimes a hot bowl of porridge can save a person from a cold winter night. These small hands cannot eliminate the homelessness crisis, but they keep the city from becoming entirely callous. In the shadows of mass and caste kindness is still present, silent but persistent. Like a small flame, warming a hope that has never completely died out. Boston's experiments, a way out of mass and caste. Although Boston is still grappling with its homelessness crisis, some new models have been and are being experimented with, offering small rays of hope in a picture that still has many dark shades. First, there's the Housing First model. A simple yet powerful philosophy: provide people with stable housing first, and then address other conditions like employment addiction recovery or mental health treatment. In contrast to traditional programs that set a series of strict criteria, from proving income to committing to sobriety. Housing First prioritizes people and their safety. A home is not just a shelter, but also a foundation for a person to restart their life. In some Boston neighborhoods, dozens of long-term homeless individuals have been moved into small apartments under this model, and initial results show higher rates of reintegration, significantly reduced healthcare burdens, and emergency service costs. In parallel, the city is experimenting with converting old hotels and abandoned warehouses into affordable temporary housing. This is a stopgap solution, but a very practical one. Instead of being left vacant or deteriorating commercially, valueless buildings are repurposed into small apartments or dormitory rooms. With a much faster renovation pace than new construction, these projects help address some of the urgent needs of thousands of people currently sleeping outdoors. Another approach is public-private partnerships to build micro-units, co-living spaces, and prefabricated homes. These ultra-small but fully equipped apartments, shared living spaces with communal kitchens and living rooms, or mass-produced, low-cost, prefabricated homes, all are solutions that have been successful in many other cities around the world. Boston is beginning to adopt them with the participation of construction companies, investment funds, and non-profit organizations. These models are not enough to solve the entire crisis, but they send an important signal. The problem of homelessness is not insurmountable. It just requires creativity, cooperation, and political will. Every new apartment provided, every old hotel revitalized, is another life given a second chance. Boston was once the birthplace of historical revolutions. Who knows, one day it might also become the birthplace of new models to end homelessness, not just for this city, but for the entire United States. Boston once echoed with the sound of gunshots that began America's independence. Today, that city faces another battlefront, not on a battlefield, but in daily life itself. The battle to reclaim dignity and safety for those living on the fringes. Mass and Cass is not just a street corner filled with tents. It's a reminder that a modern metropolis can overlook its own citizens. But from that very place, the light of compassion and the desire for change are being kindled from small helping hands to bold policies. If one day Boston can transform this crisis into a memory, it will be proof that a humanitarian revolution still begins here. If you believe these stories need to be heard, please like and subscribe to NVL Travel Documentary to join us on our journey to discover the truth behind every land.